Let us take 2 Kings 2:23, 24. Then he went up from there to Bethel, and as he was going up the road, some youths came from the city and mocked him, and said to him, "Go up, you bald head, go up, you bald head." So he turned around and looked at them, and pronounced a curse on them in the name of the Lord. And 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths. 2 Kings 2:23, 24. The passage we are meditating on today, taken from the Book of Kings, recounts a troubling event in the life of the prophet Elisha. As he was on his way from Jericho to Bethel, Elisha was insulted and tormented by a group of young men. As punishment for their mockery, 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of them. At first glance, this passage can shock us. Why would a man of God put young boys to death for mere mockery? But by examining the historical and cultural context of this story, as well as other passages of Scripture, we can better understand the deeper meaning of this episode. We will examine several points. First, it is important to note that these youths were not simple, innocent children. The Hebrew term used here actually refers to men around 20 years old. This was a large group, since 42 of them were killed. These young men were inhabitants of Bethel, a city known at the time for its idolatry and rejection of God's prophets. By insulting Elisha, they were actually rejecting the authority and message of God. As the psalmist reminds us, "Do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm." Psalm 105:15. The prophets of the Old Testament represented God before the people. To reject their message was to reject God himself. Furthermore, the mockery by these young men carried an even more insulting connotation in the cultural context of the time. By calling Elisha bald-head, they publicly disrespected him and doubted his authority as a prophet. At that time, premature baldness was seen as a mark of divine disapproval. Finally, this passage reminds us that God does not indefinitely tolerate the rejection of his word and contempt for his servants. The Apostle Paul warns us, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Galatians 6:7. God is slow to anger, but his justice is always accomplished in the end. So let's start with the approximate age of these young men. One element that can cause confusion in this passage of Kings is the exact age of the young boys who insulted Elisha. Depending on the translation, they are referred to either as children or young men. This ambiguity has led to very different interpretations over the centuries. In Hebrew, the term used is nerim ketanim, which literally means young boys or young men. But from what exact age? Opinions differ. Some exegetes lean towards children about 10 years old. Others believe they were rather teenagers or young adults. The Old Testament, unfortunately, does not provide a precise indication of the age of majority among the Hebrews at that time. Nevertheless, several clues suggest that these youths were older than mere children. First,